What is your name, your age, and the year you were born?
I am Dorothy Gresh. I'm 89 years old. I was born in 1930.
How many siblings do you have?
None living, originally four.
Where did you grow up?
In Oklahoma, southern Oklahoma, born in Kanawha, moved to Wewoka, from Wewoka to Nuyaka, from Nuyaka to Okmulgee, but then I'm in the 7th grade, then to Krebs, Oklahoma, where I finished my 10th year and started the 11th year in high school, then moved to California.
All right.
You didn't know that, did you?
I didn't know. Shoot, you've been all over the place.
Yeah.
What was it like growing up for you?
Thankfully, I didn't know we were poor, but lived in rural, poor country. My father had a job, and that was something a lot of the local men did not have. Country, I've stayed overnight with girlfriends. Their mattress was like a cotton sack filled with corn leaves, corn husk for a mattress. And I vividly remember sleeping on one and it just laying on the ground. So I grew up in poor country. And
what was the city like?
I didn't go up to the city until Okmulgee. All of the others were rural. I was in 7th grade when we moved into Okmulgee, and we were there half a year. I was overwhelmed by the size of the school because I'd been in a little country school that I don't think we had 15 kids in a class. And I moved there and it just overwhelmed me. We moved the next year to McAlester, and it was Krebs, which is near McAlester, and it was to a smaller school. And that's when my math ability became noticed. I bloomed at Krebs in the 8th grade. I graduated from 8th grade there. And but the change from country school to a big city school overwhelmed me. The change to the smaller school woke me up and made me think I knew something.
What did your parents do at this time?
My father, how far back do we need to go?
Whatever you want to talk about.
My father was a roughneck when we lived at Wewoka, and he just did day work on oil rigs, like a roustabout they'd call them. And in 1936, he got a job as a pumper, which was a full-time all employment. He didn't have to do day work, like, just if they needed him. And he worked there until World War I. Then, even with, at that time, 5 children, he became draft eligible. So he quit the oil business and went to construction work. He built underground bunkers for ammunition and went into something that deferred him from the military. And Mother, at that time, went to work. She had never worked outside the home. She went to work in a place in Okmulgee that made eye lenses for pilots. And we only lived there the 1 year, moved to Krebs, and they both went to work at the ammunition depot. Mother made 20 millimeter bullets, and my father, again, built underground storage bunkers for ammunition, which are still used today in McAlester. So, But on 1944, at the end of the war, they were both laid off
No.
the same day,
Oh.
VE Day. They were laid off because there was no more need to do.
Yeah.
The war's over. You don't need all this ammunition storage again. So that's when Mother went into the waitress business, and my father became a union carpenter, and they sent him to California. A job was in California, so that's where he had to go to get work. There was no work around here. Too many people were let go from the ammunition depot.
Oh, wow.
So it was upsetting to the whole
Mhm.
family
So that's how y'all ended up in California.
in California.
Cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. So what kind of hobbies or interests, games did you play growing up?
Mostly outdoor in nice weather. I was not allowed to play outside because I had pneumonia too many times.
Oh.
If it snowed, I couldn't go out and play.
Yeah.
But in the summertime and the falls, we would go outside, or the neighbor kids would come down. We would play in the muddy rainwater if it rained. If the neighbor kids came, but we would play Red Rover, let somebody come over. And we just had little outdoor games, hide and seek.
Just don't mind
Just
me.
outdoor.
Just taking notes. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
So, what did you do on your free time? Not necessarily growing up, but in general, like, what did you do in your free time whenever you were younger, and what do you do in your free time now?
Now I just sat around. What I did then, I don't know as I had free time.
Okay.
I was self-employed,
Yeah.
which made it difficult to say, you've got free time.
Mhm.
I run a sewing machine till even the other day I made pot holders because I had my free time. I made pot holders. So I can always find something to do.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How long did you have your sewing business for?
I started making curtains in 1952. We bought a little GI house and I did the living room drapes. My neighbor girl wanted some living drapes, so I made my neighbor girl some drapes. The insurance man that came by decided he needed some for his office. Well, then his wife decided she needed some for the house. And I piddled with, and they weren't custom made draperies. I was not that accomplished seamstress.
Mm-hmm.
But I did a job for a lady, and we had some difficulty with the materials. So I met an interior decorator, and I learned through their business how to make professional looking, much easier method of draperies and more accomplished. And one day they asked if I would like to sew for them, and I contracted their work for 13 years. Then I went on my own and found out I could make more money.
Yeah. at the house in Ponca?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I remember seeing that garage.
Oh yeah, made into a
Yeah.
workroom. I made that in about 1970. I converted into the garage, and that was 2 years before your dad. Wasn't your dad born in 72?
71.
71? He was a baby by the time I actually converted, and it became a profitable business.
Yeah.
Mhm. So.
No, that's cool.
Yeah, I taught him to use a Yankee screwdriver, in case you don't know what a Yankee screwdriver is.
I don't.
It drives screws into the wall like a ratchet force.
Huh.
We didn't have electric drills to
Yeah.
drill them in. You did it manually.
Mhm.
Well, I taught him to use that, and he couldn't have been about 2 or 3. And lo and behold, drapery lining comes on big round rolls, about 100 yards. He drilled a screw into a bolt of my drapery fabric.
Oh no.
One time I lost a strip off of. Thank goodness it was at the end.
Yeah, not like.
But he wasn't driving it into wood. He drove it into a roll.
Oh.
I shouldn't tell on him, should I?
No, you can tell on him. That's okay. Okay. What was your favorite meal growing up?
Well, probably fried chicken, because that was the special. Mother raised chickens before we moved into. No, we lived in the country, and she'd buy little chickens in the spring, and we'd have fried chicken. Other than that, it was fried potatoes one night and maybe a pot of beans the next night. And I don't mean ham and beans.
Yeah.
I mean beans.
Yeah.
So.
What was taught in your household growing up?
What was taught?
Mm-hmm.
Not a whole lot of anything. On that end, we just did our schoolwork. And then especially after Mother went to work, when the war years came on, they were so occupied. We kids just sort of existed. You walked everywhere you went, or you didn't go.
Mm-hmm.
And church on Sunday in the car. Our grandmother lived with us part of the time, so a lot of times we would try to do little stuff together, but she had a stroke by the time that rolled around, and she didn't cook. She didn't sew anymore. But when I was 5, we lived near her, near Wewoka, and our house burned down the week before Christmas. We had weeks that we lived with grandmother. It was before she had the stroke. She taught me 2-piece quilts when I was 5 years old at a pedal sewing machine. And that's my vivid memory of her before she became unable to take care of herself. So she lived with her sons and would move from one to the other. And but she was what got me started on sewing machine, was at Grandma's knee. So
well, it's kind of the same with me. Well,
it rolls around, don't it?
I mean, were there any kind of principles or anything your parents taught, or did y'all have certain roles in the household?
Rules, behave.
Roles, not necessarily rules.
Rules,
but like
rules.
Did you have to do
No, and after Mother went to work out, we children didn't always get along. After we moved to California, even I was trying to get my 2 younger sisters to help me clean up the table. By the time we moved there, my older sister had married and was gone and back and gone and back. And I was the oldest at home, so I'd try to get us a little bit of something to eat, but I thought they should be able to help me clean up the table. And one morning before school, I asked the younger one, which at that time was bigger than me and stronger than a horse. She was a rough and tumble. Picked up a handful of silverware and threw it at me and stuck in my leg, a fork prong that stayed there. I had to pull it out.
Oh my gosh.
Now, that was even mentioned when I flew to California 2 years ago, when both those 2 sisters were living. She mentioned this, throwing the silverware at me, and the other sister was sitting there, and she says, yes, and I witnessed it. So they remembered that, but I was sort of the at-home authority, or tried to be.
Yeah.
And with 2 rebellious younger sisters.
Yeah.
And
No, that's interesting.
so, yeah.
Did y'all have any family traditions?
Through a number of those years, we attended church regularly.
Mhm.
But by the time we moved to California, we did never go regularly after that. It was a little local Krebs church, you know, at Krebs. We went there, and but we never. When we lived at New Yorka, we started going. That's when Dad got the full-time job for the first time, 1936. From 36 to 42, we went regularly to church. And then some little things that I don't care to discuss
Mhm.
came up. And I married a Lutheran, not even knowing what a Lutheran was. So I eventually joined the Lutheran church and spent many years there, off and on. We sort of went in spurts and spells, and never were regular like our younger days when we were just kids. That was the social of the week, was to go.
Yeah.
So
Okay. So I'm gonna shift just a little bit. So, what were some of the historical events you witnessed
that I can remember.
that you can remember, and how did they kind of shape your viewpoint on your generation's culture?
I think interesting there might be the first newspaper I remember seeing. It was headlines that Wiley Post and who's the other Oklahoman with him, the pilot, where their plane went down.
Oh.
And I know that just as well. Will Rogers. I remember seeing the headlines in a newspaper, and it's the first newspaper I think I ever saw. Big black headlines that their plane had gone down. And that would have been about 1934, 35, somewhere in there. The next memory from about that time is the first movie I saw. And that would have been Shirley Temple in the Good Ship Lollipop.
Yeah.
The next movie I remember, there were sort of important dates because we didn't get to do that. I was in about 6th grade, and our teacher took us to see Judy Garland and Over the Rainbow.
Yeah.
And that was a big trip because we didn't go to the movie. It was too expensive at 10 cents a 10 cents a ticket. However, when we did move to McAllister, I could take a quarter, catch the streetcar from Krebs to McAllister, go to a movie for a nickel, have a dime for treats, and have a nickel to go home on the streetcar.
Oh my gosh.
And those things I remember the relatively the money situation. It's just astronomical to me today, the cost of things, because I wasn't just aware that it was going up, but it's just a gradual. And when you reflect back, and a quarter was big to us. I mean, as I said, when your grandpa and I were married, ice cream cone was a nickel a dip, but sometimes we didn't have the nickel for a cone. So the salaries were on the lower level, so it was still a struggle. And the question was...
I mean, just kind of how has historical events shaped?
I remember the first sonic boom I heard. I remember the first television set I saw. I remember the first color television I saw. And that was by the time we moved. I was married by the time I saw my first color set, and that was in Ponca City at a friend's house. Bob Munger's house had the first color set in Ponca City, I think. And we were invited over for a New Year's football game. and they remained our friends. Bob just passed away about a year ago, and what other events? Sonic Booms. Of course, the airplane industry. I remember the first helicopter I saw.
Mm-hmm.
It came in my lifetime. You probably never seen a glider, but when World War II started, there was a glider field right out about a mile from our house where they would practice dropping these planes with no engine and letting them glide to the ground. And that was in Okmulgee or New Yaka area out in the country. New Yaka was an Indian school. Of course, the name reeks Indian,
Yeah.
but it's defunct now. It's no longer.
Yeah. So how has those events and things shaped your values, your beliefs, kind of like your culture, your generation's culture?
Well, how? It's made life more convenient, more expensive, but more convenient.
Mm-hmm.
I went from no indoor bathroom to indoor slush stools. I remember the first time we had. Also, I didn't have electricity to do my homework by until I was in 7th grade.
Oh, wow.
We did kerosene lamps, or we did our homework before dark, and you went to bed early. So it's been a great change in what your kids go through, and you leave lights on all over.
So what do you think the younger generation has missed out?
I wouldn't want you to go back and go through what we did, but it was a much simpler life. People didn't expect as much. There wasn't so much emphasis on straight A's. There were kids that did it, but not me. I could get 3 A's and a B, but I couldn't get that 4th one.
Oh, no.
If I went up in history, I went down in math.
Oh.
So, but Dad always said he'd buy me a dress if I made straight A's. He never bought me a dress all through high school. That's awful to tell, isn't it?
Oh, you're close though.
So, no, I think your life is more stressful than our life was. I think you have more to tempt you than we did because life was so much simpler. I'm not saying our generation was perfect because there were still people who would steal and cheat and what, but you're just presented with so much more, and I can't get over this dope situation with and vaping. My God. Have you ever vaped?
No,
Oh, don't try it.
No.
Because that's ridiculous.
I don't understand it either. But,
Oh,
I don't understand it.
So, but to bring it down to current time, you live such a fast life.
Yeah.
And
so, how has technology? What was it like? How has it helped you or changed you?
Well, I took office business in high school. Do you know what a comptometer is?
Nope.
It's totally driven by your finger power.
Okay.
It's a adding machine if you want it to add, if you want it to multiply, but you power it with your fingers by pushing digits down. This is much simpler. Because you could ache, your arm could ache all the way up. So it's become, I remember my first electric typewriter. That was about the time I was a senior in high school. They don't even teach typing anymore, do they? In
I
high
was
school?
taught typing.
Oh, you were?
Yeah, but I mean, it wasn't on a typewriter. It was like this little. It wasn't even on a computer. It was like this little blue thing and
Pad that just had the letters on it.
letters. But I mean, it had like little classes that little things you would click, kind of like a game or something. And they'll tell you, okay, you gotta type this sentence so many times, or as quick as you can, or it's various things just to learn letters and stuff.
Letters.
You can progress and something like that. That's what we did.
We used to have assignments in high school, and a lot of the football boys took typing because it was a pushover class. Because I did homework for about 3 of them.
Oh gosh.
I was the fastest typist in the class because I probably did more typing than anybody else.
Yeah.
Because
That's funny.
yeah, because you just had to do so many pages and turn them in. Well, they can't tell who typed that page, so I just type up a stack.
Gosh, I think they're a lot stricter nowadays on that.
Oh yeah, they'd catch on too quick now. There'd be
Okay.
some way to designate who typed it. So, but no, it helped my grade.
Yeah. That's funny.
So,
How do you use technology today?
how do I use technology today? My sewing machine is sort of computerized. If it's working right, I can write my name. How do I use it today? Check on all the kids.
On what?
And
On what?
on the iPad.
Okay.
I check on all my little grandkids and their doings. I get to see more of them than I would. I get something every day from Oakley, and almost every day from Colt.
Yeah.
And it keeps me in how they're doing, and I can get a hold of you just about any time, even if I do hang up on you half the time.
So would you say social media has been a good influence, or has it been a bad influence, or how do you feel about it?
Well, I think it's been a great influence. That has grown so fast, but it's still, even as little as I understand about it all, is very convenient to me. I'd rather text you than call you on the phone.
Yeah.
Most of the time, because you can read it when you get to or want to, or you can ignore it. And you just don't want to put on anything there that you don't want spread around.
Yeah.
And that's common sense.
Yeah.
So you have to use your better judgment on how much of that to use. So
kind of going back, what was dating like?
I dated very little. For one thing, I was taller than most of the boys. Because boys weren't as tall then, I don't think.
Yeah.
I think I would like to see some statistics on that. I think the male generation now is growing a taller group of boys. Because I was 5'7", finishing grade school. We didn't have middle school. We had grade school, 1 through 8. And I was taller. A 5'7" was taller than most of the boys, and I was sort of timid and slow, and boys didn't upset me. In fact, I made first little boy that I ever had a little crush on was in 8th grade, and he was the jealous type. So we didn't get along. I went to a movie with another boy, and boy, he was through with me. I mean, and his wife, and this is a sad, no, I'm not going to tell that. He became CEO of Phillips Oil.
Oh, really? Oh.
out of Bartlesville, and while he was in the military, his first wife played around on him,
Oh.
and I said that, well, maybe he was too strict or too something ticked her off anyhow. A girlfriend of mine knew him through those years. I didn't ever know him after 11th
Yeah.
grade, and but he was a very nice young boy.
Yeah.
But some boys are just too demanding. And then there's one that I met in California that on the first date he asked me to marry him, and I said no, and he joined service the next day.
Probably why.
And poor boy. But I just didn't date too many.
Yeah. Okay. That's alright. I was just curious,
Mhm.
really, on that one. Let's see. If you had $10, what would you have done with it? What, like, if you had $10 back then, what would you do? If you had $10 now, what would you do?
That's a hard one to answer.
I guess I'm just asking, like, what was the value?
Value then?
Of just the concept of money. Like, was it a super important and a huge influence like it is today, or?
As a teenager, I only did waitress work, so I didn't make a lot of money. You didn't make tips like they make today.
Yeah.
If you got a nickel or a dime tip, serving a meal, you were lucky.
Yeah.
I sometimes held down jobs at 2 different little restaurants, so I had a few tips. But I had to buy all my own clothes. Mother never took me shopping. Dad never bought me the dress. So probably buy clothes. And I went to work for a creamery, and I made so little that our family's milk bill, because that's when they delivered milk to doorsteps in glass bottles, I paid our milk bill out of my income, and I had very little. I was doing good to get $10 left
Yeah.
for a week's work.
Yeah.
I didn't do anything, answer the phone,
Yeah.
and check in drivers when they'd come in every once in a while. And today, well, I've got lots of projects today. I am fortunate because I don't pay rent here.
Yeah.
I just buy things when I see something that needs done,
Yeah.
and I try to buy groceries. I like to buy groceries. That gets me out,
Yeah.
keeps me busy. And I may not buy everything like they want, but they can go buy their own.
That's true. They can't do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
So how do you perceive the world?
perceive the world. I think it's in a mess. When you can come on TV and call everybody names, and the biggest uproar, disrespect, I guess, for authority is one of my greatest peeves. And that's what the whole world's in right now. They don't trust anybody. They spy. They cheat. It's, I guess, just the mode, just what it's going to be. All countries are going to try, and what I can't get over is how many homeless children there are. And even homeless adults. How can they sleep on the streets and the park benches and under culverts? And I don't see any cure for it. I wish I did, but that's my greatest concern, is the homelessness, the inhumanity to humans.
Yeah.
And
So what are some more of the core values and beliefs and the things that your generation really stood by?
I don't know to answer that.
It's okay.
I don't know how to phrase it.
It's okay. Do you know what you like about your generation or what you don't like about your generation?
I think it was a simpler mode that you're going to go through as you grow up. I think you're going to be pressured more for material things than we were. We didn't have them.
Mm-hmm.
We lived without a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Not that we did it and liked it. It was just the way it was.
Yeah.
And I don't know any cure for it.
Yeah.
So
What do you like and dislike about the youngest generation?
the younger generation, I think, and I'm going younger than you, I'm going down into the 5 to 7 to 10-year-olds. I think they're overly spoiled for material things.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's but it's a thing of the future that 7 and 8-year-olds have iPads and toys, stuff that they just sit and look at, and cell phones. What does a 7-year-old really need a cell phone for?
Yeah.
But if they're going to be what they're going to have to use as they get older, the younger they learn it, the smarter they're going to be on it.
Mm-hmm.
So there's pros and cons. Yeah. And
is there anything that you would wish to change about the younger generation?
I think they need to get gym class back in schools. So many schools have dropped any form of gym class. You have to belong to a specific group. Colt has to join to a after school baseball or football, karate. What you have to go outside the school scope.
Yeah.
I still think there should be room for music and exercise gym class required.
Okay.
And I loved gym so good. I was ahead on credits. I took 2 gym classes my senior year.
Yeah.
One, the teacher had me, because I was a tall girl.
Yeah.
She had me umpire basketball games.
Yeah.
So I got to be sort of the teacher, or I was above the rest of the kids because I had 2 classes.
Yeah.
So I was allowed to do more that way. So.
Gotcha. Is there anything you would change about your generation?
My generation? No, I don't think so.
Right.
They fared well. We had our fair share of criminals.
Yeah.
and of course you would always want to change that if you could.
Yeah.
That's just sort of a given. But no.
Were there any stereotypes your generation has faced?
Stereotypes.
Even growing up from your older generations above you? Like, how did they perceive y'all?
I never thought about that. A greater percentage finishes school now than did back then. So the generation before me was the same way.
Yeah.
They seldom did anyone go to college.
Yeah.
I was the first one in my generation to finish high school. Now it's just expected. I mean, and almost compulsory that you have to go. But there was a lot of kids my age that never learned to read fluently. They knew enough to get by.
Yeah.
But to read, or the knowledge of reading, or to read and study, forget it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Is there any stereotypes of the younger generation that you think of?
That needs, uh, I don't know, I don't like the new math, I know that.
No, I don't think anybody does.
I don't, because I don't understand it.
Yeah.
I've never, it sounds stupid,
Yeah.
but I've never known why it's gone to that, unless that's how computers think,
Yeah.
that they can wire it into a computer. That's the only thing I can see.
Yeah.
That, and Scott could even tell us that if we'd talk to him,
Yeah.
if he would understand the question. So,
How has politics shaped your generation?
politics stink. How has it shaped my generation? I think we've had some good ones, and I think a politician that gets to be like a president, vice president, loses all control of, I mean, everything they do is so criticized and out in the public, and they don't have a private life.
Yeah.
And I think that would be hard.
Yeah.
And
Well,
politics is not my thing.
no, it's crazy.
I got a letter from my party. I did register. I'm a registered Republican.
Okay.
I got a letter this last week from my party thanking me for all I had done and buttering me all up, and down at the bottom, will you please send a form? They sent me the envelope to send a check back in and all that. Well, I guess they've got to have money to exist, but they could learn to operate with less money, as far as I'm concerned. I think it's too expensive to run a political, that you have to have millions to, and they rate it by how many millions they raise. That's watered down the drain.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm just too practical.
It's okay.
Uh-huh.
Well, that's kind of like all the questions I have had.
Okay.
Is there anything you want to add about your generation, or just any concluding thoughts?
I think that the younger part of my life, people respected authority more than is respected today.
Yeah.
That just may be my concept, but I do think that authority sometimes, there's just people that's not gonna respect anything, and I think it's becoming more common.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, I would have to agree. Just in my own generation.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you.
Okay.